In this episode of a Developer Experience podcast, I talked to Christina Aldan. Christina is a brand strategy consultant, keynote speaker, trainer, and mentor. We talk a lot about feelings in this episode, releasing anxiety, escaping the shame loop, and asking yourself one important question. Am I willing to shift this energy or not? Thanks for checking it out. So maybe we can start with just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
Hi.
What about myself? Hi. Well, what do I do?
What's your name, first of all?
There we go. My name. I'm Christina Aldan. I'm a brand strategy consultant with Arana Software in Las Vegas. We're based in Las Vegas. And my brand is Lucky Girly Girl. I decided a long time ago that I was a lucky girl because we all have the capacity to create our own luck. I don't believe in, and sure, there's right time, right place, but you also have to be prepared for those opportunities when opportunity comes knocking. And I believe that we have that capacity to create our own luck. So that was really how I built my brand early on, and mostly I worked with female entrepreneurs initially. Now I work mostly in tech though, and I do a lot of mentorship. I do a lot of coaching and brand strategy consulting for medium and mid-sized companies that want to make their marketing dollars work better, right? A lot of companies, especially people in tech, they're very smart, they're very cerebral, and they think I'm putting these techniques, I'm doing the technical stuff in my marketing, I'm doing the technical things that Google Ads is telling me and Facebook ads. Why aren't we getting sales? Why aren't we doing better in our work? And so I help people make that emotional connection and really get in touch. And sometimes that means you got to get in touch with your own emotions too about, why you're doing the work that you do. So that's a lot of the type of work that I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe not the first place that I met you, but I think one of the most significant moments that I had met you was during one of your emotional intelligence discussions at a conference.
Oh, thank you.
And I just remember walking away from that being, with lots of good ideas and
that's awesome.
and things, homework, I guess, for me to do to kind of get in touch with that side of it.
I tend to do that. Yeah. Make sure you bring a pen and paper whenever we're talking, because I tend to offer homework or articles to read or introductions, connections to make people get, just examine what you're doing and what you're doing that's working and what's not working for you anymore. It's constant, and it should be a lifelong goal to always be learning and always be examining how you do things. And how you're processing those emotions, because that's how we learn, right? And a lot of people like to say, "Oh, I'm a lifelong learner," but are you really? Are you gathering data? Are you learning the technical things? Are you memorizing code? Are you memorizing words? Or are you really embodying the lessons that are to be learned? Are you really storing those data and processing those data in a healthy way? And being able to recall them in moments when you need them, right? Because it's a lot easier to say it, but when you're charged, you're mad, you're angry. In some cases, people who might be on the autism spectrum, they might have different reactions that are intuitively just natural. They just respond and react right away because something's triggered, a sound. People with PTSD, people with trauma. I've come out of grief in the last few years, 3.5 years, with the loss of my husband. It was very tragic and painful, and still the grief waves hit me. And so I had to learn how to manage my emotions and still perform, right? We still got to show up, even during COVID. Even then, it's like we have to still constantly work toward what are we building? What are we growing? At the end of the day, your job expects you to still show up.
One thing I just there's like a phrase that you used somewhere in there that I want to call out a little bit. You said you're constantly working towards something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm putting words into your mouth when I would say like that applies to everything. That applies to as we started talking about emotional intelligence and all the work that you've done to kind of get more in touch and get a grasp on what your emotions are and what they mean.
Yeah.
Even all of that stuff those are things you're working towards all the time, right?
Yeah, those are the hardest things I'm working towards all the time.
Me too.
I'll tell you what, Steve, like a lot of people don't know this about me. I guess some people do. I did do a talk about it once, but I was never going to be a mom. I was never going to have kids. I used to work 80 hours a week. I used to just go, go, go. And then when I met Jay, of course, he came with 2 little ones. And so to watch them process their emotions, it's almost as though I'm watching myself process my emotions, and even seeing the rawness of it. I just witnessing what they're going through and how it even will bring up those emotions in me. Either, I want them to stop making the noise, stop crying, or I have to choose to hold space while they cry, while they throw a fit, or to see my son do something, to bully his little sister, or even to see the dynamic with the kids playing with their friends, or they're playing street hockey or something like that. All those things I witness. I go through those in myself as well, right? Yeah. I have to pause and go, oh,
yeah, for sure.
There's that thing he's doing. I do that thing too.
Yeah. One of the things that I talk to my therapist about pretty frequently is she always says that for a child, having a parent who's doing that kind of work and figuring these kinds of things out, it's like a cheat code for them, because now they have this role model in their home who's like also figuring these things out. But from my perspective, it's also kind of like I feel really, really on the one hand, yes, I see what you're feeling, child, right. And like I'm frustrated for you and all of that stuff. But also, it's kind of nice that you're dealing with this stuff, and I am maybe able to contribute to the conversation in a way that is way more productive than I was able to talk about it when I was 5, or like I was talking about it with my parents.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I like to think that, and I don't always win,
Oh yeah.
Especially some of those virtual learning days where my poor extrovert son was, having a meltdown because he's such an extrovert, and he really missed the interactions with the students and with his friends at school. Sometimes it was all right. We're packing you up. You're in your room today. You're virtual learning in your room because I can't deal with the tantrums today. I mean, sometimes even for my own mental health, I just would have to, I'd reach my limit. But when I think about it, most of us, we're not taught emotional intelligence. We're not taught how to deal with our emotions in a way that is going to process them, that we're going to come out the other side. And what we really teach our kids too is that even the follow through of forgiving yourself for acting out. Okay, you hit your sister, you feel really bad, and now it's not up to you to continually beat yourself up like I've done most of my life. Right?
Yeah.
Is beat myself up. Oh, Christina, why'd you do that? Oh, you dummy. I say those kinds of things, and that internal dialogue, I hear it, I see it. And I work really hard so that my kids don't have it. I don't always succeed, but I'd like to think that most of the time I do.
Yeah, and like you said, we're constantly working toward
constantly.
This,
I mean, even the top performers. I mean, as you know, I do executive coaching too, and I mentor people. Mostly these days, I guess I mentor a lot of 20-something students and startups, but I have mentored young kids, junior high, that were struggling with school and expulsion, or even, people who are transitioning careers that might be older than me. Mentorship can be anything. Mentorship just means somebody with that experience can serve as a guide, to help you achieve some set intentional goals through that experience. Mentorship can be any age, but But lately it seems that I've, especially this last couple of years, have been such a need. I've taken on even more mentees. But I think it's interesting to even watch them, high performers, especially, I think, really struggle with that pushing. I don't understand. Again, I'm doing the technical things to achieve, right? I'm getting the A's. I got the scholarships. If it's executive coaching, right? I got the raise. I got the promotion. I'm working at the top Fortune 100 company. What is it? Why am I getting these things wrong? This frustration. Well,
Yeah.
you know, there's something to be said for merit-based performance, and also equally and oppositely, we have to think about tuning into ourselves. There's one thing about other people rewarding us for technical performance, but what are we doing inside for ourselves? And a part of that is that forgiveness.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I've personally been struggling with a lot lately, is that forgiveness and being okay.
Yeah, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, totally. I was having a conversation yesterday, actually recording for this podcast with someone else. And we were talking about, one of the questions that I'm really interested in talking to people about for this show is, like, when you fall off the wagon with your habits, how do you get back on? And one of the things that this person, John, my coworker and friend, said was, I like forgive myself when I have a couple bad days. I'm like, whatever, that happens. And then I just start doing it the next day. And he talked about the relationship between that and the habit breaking and the guilt and shame that I feel because the habit is breaking. And I honestly hadn't really made that connection before about how much that impacts and how it snowballs from there, because I start feeling really, really bad about myself and saying bad things about myself. And then it's not just about the fact that I stop the habits, it's that I always stop the habits and I always do this thing and start saying those awful things.
We start using those finite. It's funny. One of my good friends, Nancy Gabriel, shout out to Nancy. She's one of the best mediators in the state of Nevada. But we've been friends for a long time. And her mediation services, I know, have helped a lot of relationships and helped a lot of people. But she always talks about how her late husband, he would do, I can't remember what she calls it, the downward spiral. He would start gathering evidence, right? Oh, I did this thing. Right? It starts with, I did this thing. But then suddenly, I always do this thing. Yes. And then this happens, and then this is going to happen. And then before you know it, he's lying dead in a ditch somewhere, broke with no money, no job, no home. Like by the end of the, he's been creating this story and just starting to gather the evidence of how the shamefulness and I think that we all have that tendency. Now, this comes with a caveat, of course. Nancy is one of the most optimistic people I've ever met. She's very, very positive. She had an amazing relationship with her father, who is chronically optimistic. And I did a podcast interview with her on One Lucky Girly Girl where she talks about it. But, she had those tools. Most of us, we don't have those tools. And so our brain has the natural tendency to look for the danger and then continually seek out that pattern and go, oh yeah, here's the pattern that I do. Oh, and also here's more evidence of what I do. And it really is it's got to be an intentional interruption of that pattern before in your mind you end up broke, homeless, laying in a ditch. Just because you maybe spilled your coffee or something that morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, are there any specific tips or things that you think of yourself for kind of escaping that little like shame loop or whatever we might call it?
Yeah, I feel it and I stop it anyway. And that's really hard. So I recognize it and I go, oh, I'm doing that thing. Now,
Uh-huh.
mostly historically, what the pattern would be, so what, right? I do a fine then, F you, and I go, I'm doing that thing. I don't care. Right. And
Nobody
then I
tells me
just
what to do.
go, right. Nobody tells me what to do. I'll show you. Right. And I see that in my kids too. Obviously they don't have the impulse control, but as adults, we can practice that interruption. And so, the willingness to interrupt, it's not, again, you can do the
Mm.
technical tools, right?
Hmm.
You have things, there are things that people recommend. Splash cold water on your face. The physical sensory change will cause your nervous system to adapt and shift. It'll cause a
Hmm.
biological shift in your hormones and help interrupt. So that's one thing. However, you have to be willing to splash the cold water on your face, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that you can do is you can hold your breath. You can hold your breath, or you can exhale really slowly, almost as if you're not even exhaling at all until the air is completely out of your, and that will force you then to take a huge inhale, and it changes the carbon
Hmm.
dioxide in your brain and the oxygen levels biologically and physically. Again, you have to have a willingness to do it,
Yes.
right? So what that looks like for me is I go, oh, that sucks. No, fine, forget it. And then I go, you know what? I'm going to feel it, and I'm still going to splash cold water. So there, right? And I'm still going to feel it, and I'm going to exhale, and I'm going to cuss every single cuss word I know on the way that I am exhaling, right?
Hmm.
So I'm still allowing myself to feel that. I'm
Yeah.
kind of laughing at myself at the resistance and the unwillingness to do the thing, yet I'm still doing the thing because I know that if I want to get the results that I want, the other alternative is to continue suffering. And I
Mm-hmm.
already know what that looks like. I've already done that for 46 years of my life,
Hmm.
45, nearly 46 years of my life. And so I already know. I've been there. I've done that. Another thing that I do is I do tapping, which is fantastic. And it's the weirdest woo woo, like simplest thing, but you can go. I use Tapping Solutions. There's a free app, and they have tapping protocols for releasing anxiety,
Mm.
for I'm upset at the state of the world, which many of us are right now. In the before times, I don't think I had that meditation in the tapping app, but now with COVID, it's a thing. And they have all different kinds of tapping. The thing about tapping is that even though it seems woo woo and it seems like it doesn't help, again, it trips that switch that makes me question, am I willing to shift this energy or not?
Mm. Yeah.
And so I open up the app, and I'm not really doing anything. I let the app talk. I don't even repeat the meditation. They say, okay, now do this. And even though I'm feeling stressed, this doesn't define me. And I sit there and I go, yeah, whatever,
Just
but I
get to the tapping.
just get to the tapping, but I still do the tapping, even though I'm being
Yeah.
cynical, right? And then it
Yeah.
says, okay, now that we've done this, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes or whatever. And the science behind it is that you're stimulating certain points of your nervous system that are closest to the surface of your
Sure.
body, tapping above your eye, your nervous system, your nerve endings, the side of your eye, under your eye, your collarbone, and you do it in a pattern. It starts to regulate your nervous system. Anything in a pattern, anything that kind of shifts in rhythm is going to help. And then, of course, you're tapping the most sensitive parts where the nerves are closest to your skin. So the
Mm.
science behind it helps, but also it's that willingness. And I'm
Hmm.
not always willing, but when I am, even when I am willing and I have resistance, I still do it anyway. And I kind of laugh at myself about it. Yeah. Screaming into a pillow is really good, especially for
Hmm.
anger. If I've learned anything in my, thousands of hours of therapy and training and emotional intelligence studies, it's that anger turned inward, anger unexpressed goes inward. And then that turns into depression. So we have to have some kind of a physical expression for our anger. So I will scream into my pillow until I'm hoarse. I will go into my room, shut the door, and kick my bed and throw a tantrum like a toddler. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not hurting myself, but I'm expressing it. Some people say I go for a bike ride, I go for a run. And even with running, right? You eventually you get to the point where you get that adrenaline high, that runner's high. Same thing for weights. I'll do push-ups. I mean, I've got all kinds of tools. I'm writing a memoir right now about how I regained and fought for my mental health over the last few years. And push-ups is one of the things. Just and not doing push-up like, oh gosh, I'm getting stronger and I need to build up my arms. In fact, it's doing push-ups where I try to push the floor away from me.
Oh, interesting.
I'm pushing the house away from me.
It's like symbolic.
Right. And so I'm bursting that anger out of my body and taking it out on the house. I'm right. It's almost like I'm punching the floor as I do my push-ups. And I put a pull-up bar in my office door. So every time I walk in the office or out of the office, I just do a pull-up or two, and that helps that burst. And the physiological changes that come with that are super helpful. And again, just that nanosecond beforehand, it requires me to ask of myself, am I willing to do something to shift this energy? If I'm not willing, okay, I'm not ready yet. Fine, I'm going to hold on to my anger.
Right.
And then I'll sit there and in 30 minutes will go by and I'll go, are these the results that I want? How much longer am I going to sit here? Because I'm not really much good to my family, my clients, when I'm holding on to that anger.
For sure. I love that idea of that willingness to interrupt and pivot. And it is honestly, that has me just thinking about so many things about the way that I react to things.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about so this is maybe not the kind of thing, this getting into this like shame loop or whatever it is that we're talking about, or any sort of emotional loop where you're having trouble focusing on anything. I actually just said the word that I wanted to ask you about, which is funny, because what I was thinking in my head was there seems like there's a tension between this willingness to interrupt and pivot and focus and remaining focused. And it feels like, in the short term, I would think that I'm always thinking to myself, no, I need to focus, keep looking at this thing, stop being distracted by this other thing that you're doing. But in reality, maybe that is the answer to my question, is the tension is really just, set the focus aside for now. Like deal with this interruption in the moment.
I mean, even coming out of, so much grief with the loss of my husband and all how it triggered my own PTSD and trauma from childhood and brought a whole lot of that stuff up that I hadn't dealt with for so long. So then I had to process all of that stuff on top of my grief, with that, it was, all right, just focus. Why can't I just do this? Well, you can't. Your brain physiologically can't. When you're in your amygdala is hijacking your brain, you biologically are unable to use your higher functions. And so the solution to that is to express it, put the focus aside, give space to whatever that feeling is. I'm mad. I'm shameful. I'm mad that I'm shameful. I'm shameful that I'm mad. I'm frustrated at the state of the world. These people aren't doing things. Maybe you're concerned that your family is getting vaccinated or isn't getting vaccinated, or politics, or, your work isn't doing it right because now your whole culture is shifted with remote working and, schools are different. Whatever that is, you've got to be able to give that space. And so a lot of people, they'll say, oh, well, have you tried yoga? I'd be like, bitch, I have been doing yoga for 15 years. Like, don't talk to me about yoga. Okay. I'm one of the most bendy people you know, right? I could sit and meditate for 45 minutes, for an hour, for an hour. That's not what we're talking about here, right? We are talking about expressing those difficult emotions and feeling them. Something that helped for us is in our house, I got a feelings wheel pillow, and that's really helpful. And it talks about it shows the six basic, emotions that we have, and then how can we define them in the outer circle after that, and the outer circle after that, because a big problem of feeling those emotions is not being able to just name them and name the correct one. Well, they say, I feel bad. All right. Well, what does that mean? You're
it's
mad.
Pretty vague.
Right? Are you frustrated? Are you feeling abandoned? Are you feeling what does bad mean? Right? Because for some people, love might feel bad. For some people, depending on their trauma or their level of intimacy or comfort, love might be bad. So let's actually really dig in and name what those emotions are and name it. And that's even through my work. That's what I do with people is we always start with our core values of the company. What's the company all about? What do we stand for? What's our focus? And let's name it. Well, we want to make money and we want to help the world. Okay. Everybody wants to help we all want to make the world a better place. Some people, Hitler wanted to make the world a better place. Like, let's talk about exactly defining what that means so we can get really clear on it. That way, when that resistance comes, you can express it. Okay, well, I'm really frustrated because I've been a remote worker for 10 years. And now because COVID hit, suddenly all these other perks are happening because the whole company's gone remote. And now I'm resentful because they never made these concessions for me before. And now I'm resentful and that hurts and I'm upset. Well, that's hard to say. It's hard to say
definitely.
for men. It's hard to say for top performers. It's hard to say for people in tech where they've been rewarded historically for, so many sacrifices and sacrificing their weekends and time with family and things like that. I think that we have to really name and get clear on what those feelings are before we can make the connection to ourselves and connect with others about that. And then that's how we start healing it. And sometimes, even as I'm resenting it, I'm doing it.
Yeah, for sure. But you're more aware about what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you were to catalog the time that I spend with my therapist, probably like 25% of it is trying to actually just name the emotion.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing to do. Often, we'll take this time and we'll kind of walk through a scenario of something that happened and I'll be able to feel it. And I'll say like my stomach feels like all tight. Yeah. And I've said that like 100 times. And she's like, okay, but that's not an emotion. What is the emotion? Like, I don't know. Inevitably, right. It almost always comes back to shame. Is what it turns out. But for me, at least,
people will do almost anything to avoid feeling that pain. Yeah. People will do almost anything to avoid feeling that pain. That's why we say in marketing, right? When I'm creating a marketing campaign or we're talking about a brand strategy for the year for a company, what's the pain point? What's the problem that you're solving? How are you fixing and easing people's shame and their pain? What's that solution? Because people will pay lots and lots of money to solve that, to avoid feeling it, to stop feeling that, right? There's a reason why here in Las Vegas gambling is so popular, right? There's a reason. And that's how the games are designed. So if you can understand, that within yourself, I'll tell you, Stephen, like my work just coming out of this in the last few years has been super effective. My mentees are thriving. Even during COVID. I mean, I've got a mentee who's doing his second round of raise for his funding. I've got students who right out of school, they're, making $70,000, $80,000 coming out of school, which is a generational wealth change for a lot of these students who are first generation Asian, Cambodian, Vietnamese students, going to school, graduating, and really being able to set the tone from here on out of their families that have experienced, in the case of Cambodia, famine. And
Right.
in Africa, it's so interesting to see how startups are just blossoming right now, and really investors are even investing in a lot of these e-commerce technologies, Internet of Things. There's not a lot with VR and AR, of course, because there's some hardware issues there. That's a challenge. And even in the US, there's a lot of issues with microchips and just availability, right, of equipment. But
we have logistical problems all over the place
everywhere. Yeah. And I think we always have. It's just with COVID, things are now everything's coming to the light. We can't brush things under the rug anymore.
Yeah.
Our healthcare system, our school system. I mean, here in Nevada, we have, I think, the largest school district in the country. We're really struggling to keep it all together. Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, I would say, like, the difficult side of doing things. Can we talk a little bit more about the positive side? Like, what does it look like for you when your day-to-day things are just working and they're firing? Like, are there systems that you have in place that help keep you on track? So we kind of mentioned before we started recording, you said something about, we could talk about systems that used to work that no longer work.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, what are those things that give you that sense of I'm doing the right thing, or I know that I'm getting stuff done?
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw a poll on Twitter last week. Somebody said, what's the easiest way for you to manage your to-do list? And it said, an app, having a written to-do list, setting reminders. And it was something like 70% of the people said a written to-do list, which is still, the thing about that is, and I keep 3 top priorities on my to-do list this is the big things that I need to get done today, and everything else is fluff. I'm the type of person who likes to do the small little things to feel productive, just to cross them off my list. I mean,
that's a dopamine hit right there.
Right? I've written things on my list just so I can cross it off. Like, look, I did laundry. It's not on my list. All right, I'm writing it on my list.
I did it.
Cross it out. I did it. But some good things, and I think this has come also with people who are working remote now, who didn't used to have those remote opportunities. You can have a meeting, you can pause and go grab a water. You can have a meeting, you can pause and go for a walk around the block. You can have a meeting, do some work. You can go throw a load of laundry in and change your brain waves. When you change your brain waves, instead of always being on, and developers are notorious for this hyper focus. It's important for our health to take those breaks and shift our brain waves. It's really, really important. That's how we heal, and that's how we can perform better. Some other things are, you can train your brain. You can train your brain to retain more information better, to store it better. There is a little game, in fact, like a memory card game that you can do, and you can try to time yourself to go faster and faster and faster. And you start to train your brain to process faster and encode those memories faster. Of course, that's how we learn, right? And then recalling the data faster. We can use that. We don't have to be Sherlock Holmes through, build an entire mind palace, but we can use associative techniques, by association, connecting a memory to something we already know. when I do these types of things, my brain works better in a way that at the end of the day, I don't feel exhausted. So a lot of us, we feel exhausted. Oh, I'm just going to go home. I just want to shut my computer down. As soon as we unplug, we kind of, blink our eyes and shake our head a little like, oh gosh, I've been staring at that screen for 12 hours. Now I'm going to go interact with my family like a human, like an in-person family. Now I'm going to go grab dinner and make dinner for myself. It's a different kind of thing that our brain is processing. If we break those moments up, we're going to feel less of that fatigue. And we're getting so much fatigue now because we have the capacity to schedule back-to-back meetings, right? And not only are we scheduling those back-to-back meetings, but while we have them, I'm looking at your face. I'm just focusing on one talking head, a 2D head. Whereas if I'm in the boardroom, I might look around, I might wiggle in my chair a little bit, I might move my eyes, I might fidget with my pen a little, and it gives my brain a little bit of rest to switch those brain waves a bit and change the stimuli before I look back at whoever's speaking or the presentation or whatever. That's not what we're seeing now with our work days. And so I make it intentional to do those types of things. I'm intentional about doing some push-ups just to get the blood flowing through my system. If I'm going to sit there and browse social media, then I'll do a few stretches. I'll do a few floor stretches and sit down and look at Facebook and set a timer and go, oh, okay, that was my 10 minutes. I will log out of social media so that if I am logging in, I have to do it with intention. And I change my passwords to something like, I am powerful, or logging into social media. I make my password intentional and I change it regularly so that my brain's not on autopilot, just picking it up, going blah, blah, blah. And then 3 hours go by and I'm sitting down hunkered in this uncomfortable position just to avoid getting back to work or avoid something. But then, of course, if I'm avoiding it now, that means later I got to make it up. It means I'm making it up on the weekend. I'm making up that time when I should be sleeping. And humans, just like plants, are photogenic creatures. So that blue light set in our cornea stimulates our nerves, stimulates our brain, our nervous system. And that repetition eventually trains our brain to get out of what's natural for us, our circadian rhythm, to not follow the sun, to not follow the day. And I'm not a morning person. However, staying up until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning just to browse TikTok videos or quote unquote work.
Right.
You're really not as effective if you've been staring at the same line of code. Yeah. It's not effective at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I do and that I work with my mentees to do and any executives that I'm coaching for performance. We got to take care of our brains. That means protein, fat, and sugar. We see a lot of people who try different fad diets to cut out fat or cut out protein or cut out sugar. And it really causes, like, if you cut out sugar, you get a lot of anxiety. Of course, if you have too much sugar, you have a lot of anxiety.
Right.
But, if you have too much fat, unhealthy fats, of course, that's not good either for your arteries, right? So it's really important to feed our brain the proper nutrition and to make sure that it has some rest, some breaks. Yeah.
Yeah. The breaks remind me of what you said earlier about that willingness to interrupt. I must catch myself 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And, when I've got 5 minutes in between a meeting, and tell myself checking Slack is not a break. You have to actually get away from the computer. That's what you have to do.
Change the brain waves. That's what I tell myself. Yeah. Change the brain waves. Change the brain waves. What does that mean? It means I'm coloring, means I'm stretching, means whatever posture hunched over I just was doing. I need to do the opposite, opening up my chest, reaching my arms back posture to undo what I was just doing. It means, going to see what my kids are doing, stepping outside, getting some fresh air, some sunshine. Of course, we have plenty of sunshine here in Vegas.
Lucky.
It's easy for me to say.
We do not have that in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
But that probably goes without saying. So I think maybe I have one more question that I want to ask you. And that is about how do you personally take the time to refine these types of things, and how do you do work on this?
Yeah, for me, I pick one thing for 3 months, and I just do that thing over and over and over and over again. So one day I decided and realized very painfully that I was lacking in boundaries, and so I would say yes a lot. Because I kept saying, "Oh, I'm busy.
That resonates.
I'm busy. I'm just so busy. That's all. I can't. I'm busy." Well, and then what happened? I'd end up being the flaker friend because at the last minute of, sure, let's go out for coffee. And then at the very last minute, sorry, I can't make it. I've got this deadline. Yeah, sure. We'll do that volunteer project. Oh, nobody else is doing it. Okay. So it's me at the 11th hour doing all the things. And then I resent people because I'm the one who committed our nonprofit to doing it without other people, and enough help. And I was looking around going, but I'm busy and I'm doing these things and I'm so important. And I had to pause and go, wait a minute, I'm the common denominator here. What really is the issue? And it was really me saying yes all the time because I wanted people to like me, overcommitting because so I had to learn how to say no without being a jerk. In fact, I do a talk on this. I've delivered a keynote out there. It's recorded on YouTube. And, I studied it for 3 months, essentially became a student of saying no. And I did things. I made games with it. I set reminders on my phone. I read every single day. I read a page in a book. I read a blog post about boundaries. I read an article. I engaged in some kind of a space where boundaries were at the forefront. I talked about it in therapy. I wrote about it for 3 months straight. I just became a student, and we can do this now because we are in the age of information. It's at our fingertips, and we have that ability as long as we have a willingness to change things and shift things. And I had to, because I couldn't use my hands anymore. I would be sitting there, designing websites. That's how I first started was HTML and CSS before I got into marketing and branding. But using my hands with tears down my face overnight, pulling all-nighters, going, but I told my client that I would finish this website design by tomorrow, and I've got a meeting, so here I am. And one of my friends, she sat me down and she's like, what are we going to do about your hands? I was like, what do you mean? I'm an entrepreneur. I just push through it. You got to be stronger than the pain. It was like a badge of honor. And we see this in tech too, right? We see this behavior about working all over the weekend or things like that.
The hustle.
The hustle, right? And she said, listen, nobody is asking you to sacrifice your hands, your beautiful hands. What are you going to do? And I said, it's not that important. It's fine. I'm just going to work through it. I'm just a phase and it'll be fine. She said, okay, well, if you think it's not a big deal and your beautiful hands are not important, then let's go down to the VA hospital and we'll talk to some veterans, and you look them in the eye and you tell them that your hands are not important and that the sacrifice that you're making is so important after, the sacrifices they've made for our country. And I was like, whoo, that was a wake-up call for me. That was a big reality check. And I just didn't want that anymore. And I'm so grateful for her friendship, and I'm so grateful that I have people around me in my tribe to sit me down and go, hey, wake up, look at this. And not all of us have that. And we have to kind of be that for ourselves. So that's what I did. For 3 months, I just became a student of saying no, and I got pretty good at it.
Cool. That's awesome.
And now I can help other people.
Well, I'm super grateful that you said yes to doing this podcast for what it's worth. I made the cut. Very happy about that.
That's awesome.
Is there anything else that you think is worth bringing up or talking about in these last few minutes that we have?
I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned from one of my mentors, and again, my friend Nancy Gabriel, gave me this gift, is to tell yourself the truth as gently as possible. And it really helped me in all things with shame. When I start going down in that shame spiral, when I start going into that, oh, you're so stupid, why did you do that? Now they're going to think this, and now you're never going to get another referral, another contract, another job. You can't work. You're going to be homeless. You're going to lose your house. You're going to be dead in a ditch. So, before I go all the way down there, it's a really good tool for me to go pause. Mm-hmm. Can I tell myself the truth in the kindest way possible? Yeah, I made a mistake. I screwed up. Okay, is it worth the death penalty? Is it worth me constantly bludgeoning myself internally for the next 30 years, right, over this tiny mistake? It's called being human. Mm-hmm. And I think as a recovering perfectionist myself, giving myself that grace that I would give to other people is probably one of the best things that help, because otherwise, again, that anger internalized, it can really turn into depression. It can turn into, self-sabotage and things like that. Feelings of feeling like an imposter, like you're not good enough, like you're going to mm-hmm. be found out at any moment. And so giving yourself that forgiveness and that grace is really, really key. I think that's the start, because we're never going to be able to forgive other people. We're never going to be able to understand why our relatives are getting the vaccine or not getting the vaccine, or voted the way they did or didn't vote the way they did. We're never going to be able to do that until we can really come to terms with that tension within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, put the mask on yourself before helping others with their mask.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Developer Experience Podcast. Also, thanks to my guest, Christina Aldan. Christina's website is luckygirlygirl.com. If you like the show, support it at the podcast's home, anchor.fm/a-developer-experience. I'm Steve Hicks. Check stephenhicks.me/where to find me on the internet. Take care, friends.
Hey, wake up.